I probably should have known how many agents forums we already have had, so I could have introduced you to the nth agent forum, but actually I don't know the figure, but we'll find that out next time. But I think there's been quite a few, so welcome again to the agent forum, and still a few people coming in, which is fine. So a wee bit of housekeeping first. Obviously we're using Teams. If I could encourage you all to use the mute function, if you could mute your devices, please, so that we're not getting any background noise. Obviously, if you want to speak, then you obviously have to unmute that. We are encouraging that videos are off, unless there's someone actually speaking, because it does sometimes impact on the functioning of Teams. If you want to speak at any time, it's hands up, or indeed use the chat function for questions or any comments, and we'll be constantly monitoring the chat function. Obviously, the whole point of this forum is not only to give you information and updates on what we're doing within the service, but it's also to encourage you to ask us questions and have any informal discussion or debate, if that's the way forward. Okay, so again, if I could encourage you to use your mute function, please, so that we're not getting all background noise. Obviously, the focus is on a collaborative approach, engaging with you, engaging with each other, building that relationship between ourselves and yourselves. And also, we value your feedback at any time, not just on the back of an agents forum. So that's the housekeeping done. And we'll just give you a glimpse of the agenda, which has been sent out. So as you see, quite a busy agenda, starting with Paul McCarry, the Head of Planning and Economy. He's going to give a welcome and some introductions. We're then covering various topics of conservation areas, private water supplies, some updates on our community wealth building strategy, and then an overall planning update with the various elements of work that we've been focusing on this year, which hopefully will be of interest and relevance to you all. And as I said, there'll be questions then at the end. There will be questions allowed at the end of each topic, or again, if you want to put anything in the chat function, we'll be monitoring that regularly. So given the busy agenda and the time that we have, I will pass you over to Paul to welcome you all to the agenda and give some introductions and no doubt some useful information. Over to you, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's fine this sunny morning. I'm sitting in View Mount and the sun's blasting in the window, so it's a nice start to the week for me. I'd just like to say an enormous thanks to everybody who's attending today. I think these sessions are really important. It enables us to communicate what we're doing to you, but equally allows us to get the feedback from you, and also ask any questions, gain clarification on what we are doing. I think, as always, I would say that my door's always open. Many of you do get in touch with me or attend meetings with you regularly, but if there are any concerns, if there's any questions, the door's open. Feel free to get in touch, and I'll drop my email address into the chat function so everyone has it. I'd just like to start by saying, over the last 12 months, our performance has been strong. In terms of the determination timescales for planning applications. Well, not every application hits the average timescale or meets the determination date. On the whole, we're performing incredibly well. And I recognise not everyone's experience is always the most positive that we aspire to, but I think in recognition of the number of applications that are coming through the door, the varying types of application that are coming through the door, and our staffing levels, we're doing incredibly well. Resourcing wise, there's been churn within all parts of the planning and economy service in the last 12 months. But I think despite the challenges that the council is going through, we've always made the case that we are essential to delivering prosperous and thriving places, to delivering a sustainable economy, but equally to balancing the impact of development on our natural and historic environments. And as a result, we have managed to fill our vacancies, retain our our core staffing cohort across the service, and as a result continue to deliver a high quality planning service. I think moving on to the local development plan aspect, I see it's not on the agenda today, but in terms of planning update, I'm sure we'll touch on it. The team are working hard to respond to the gateway, the gate check process. That we've had feedback from the government, and we aspire to have a response back to the government by the end of January on the matters raised in relation to the evidence report. What I would say is that we started off on the journey to deliver a new development plan by working collaboratively and in partnership with the development industry, all the way through to speaking about housing numbers, to comparing methodologies, to putting a response forward through our evidence report that has been largely endorsed by the DPA with regards to the projected housing numbers. The trick now is to demonstrate how we will alleviate some of the challenges that we're likely to have in terms of infrastructure first and alleviating infrastructure constraints. But David and the team are working hard to address that. Moving on, we've got Mark on the call today to speak about private water supplies. This is a topic that I've become heavily involved in over the last few months in particular, because in Aberdeenshire we still have instances of water scarcity whereby houses and homes that are connected to private water supplies, they're starting to see those supplies diminish, and this is very serious in terms of the long-term habitation of those properties. So Mark's going to speak about some of the guidance and what we're going to be looking for moving forward in terms of new proposals for houses with connections to private water supplies. I think other than that, the updates that you'll get today will start to demonstrate the changes that we're making and how we're starting to move forward. We're starting to deliver innovation right across the service. Cheryl will be speaking about our approach to conservation areas, both the element of conservation area appraisal, but also where we're starting to deallocate conservation areas across Aberdeenshire as well. And Kath will no doubt be speaking to you about some of the improvements in our performance through the National Planning and Improvement Framework as we move on to year 2. It's quite a jam-packed day, so I'm not going to speak for too much longer. I'm looking at the time and I think I've got a minute left. So I think, as Mary's outlined, we've got a busy schedule. I want to welcome you all, and I want to make sure that you're all encouraged to ask questions, and if not, get in touch with us afterwards, and we'll make the appropriate arrangements to either respond to you or meet with you with to resolve any concerns or issues that you may have in terms of how we're performing and how we're delivering the service. But again, thanks very much for participating today. I'll now hand back to Mary to get on with the show. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, everyone, as Paul said, yeah, we have a very busy agenda, so I'm not going to delay it any further. I'm going to take in our next speaker, who is Cheryl Roberts-Nairn. Many of you will know her as the team leader of the Historic Environment team. Cheryl's responsible for the built heritage, environment and historic assets, and also archaeology, obviously as part of the planning service. And as Paul's indicated, Cheryl's going to be giving us a talk on conservation areas in general, and also the work that the team are doing in terms of de-designation of conservation areas. So I'll hand you over to Cheryl. And
that's great.
And she is there, right? Thank you. On you go, Cheryl. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the PowerPoint presentation up. I think it is slowly coming. No, that's not going to work. Try again. Please, it's not letting me share the file. Can I just check that people can see that now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's come through. Okay. All right. Sorry
Sure.
about that. Thank you. Okay, so well, yeah, Mary's already given like a bit of an introduction to me already, but my name's Charlotte Robertson. I'm the Historic Environment Team Leader. So I manage the team of built heritage specialists, the archaeologists, but we also run a historic asset management project. So on top of our development management work, we also manage projects on historic buildings, apply for grant funding, and we also do a number of outreach events, which include the Doors Open Day. But I really wanted to talk to you today about our conservation areas. Quite a big an issue for our team, and I'm sure they can be an issue for agents and applicants as well. So I thought we would go through some of the issues and some of the reasons behind those issues and what our team would like to do about it, particularly around the de-designation and possible boundary reductions for some of our settlements. And then what I'll do at the end is go through each of our administrative areas, go through the plans that we have for the conservation areas. I unfortunately can't go into detail about the ones that we potentially might de-designate because that's not in the public forum yet, but I will give you an idea of numbers and which ones we're looking at currently. So I guess to start off with just some of the issues that we have, one of them is resources. So we have we used to have 40 conservation areas in Aberdeenshire. There are about 600 in Scotland, so we have about a 7% share of the total conservation areas in the country. And we only have 3.4 members of staff who look after them. And so we have around 11 conservation areas per member of staff. It takes approximately 2 years to start a review to get it through to Scottish Government for approval. So it would take each staff member 22 years to review all the conservation areas in their area. So they're supposed to do it every 5 years, and that's our problem number one. The other issue we have is the complexity of the process. So we have to follow a legislative process. The documents such as the appraisals and the management plans take a significant amount of time to produce, and we also have to make them accessible, to make them available online. And then the consultation process to get them through includes the community, committee, Historic Environment Scotland and Scottish Government. So it can take us a long time to get through each conservation area. And then once we've done all of that, we have a bit of an issue with poor awareness of the documentation. So they're supposed to be there for planners, agents, applicants, homeowners. But I think that a lot of people can't find them, don't use them, aren't sure what they're for. And then finally, we have a bit of a disparity also in the conservation areas that we do have covered. So some of them have like full documentation in place, some of them have absolutely none, some of them have documentation, but it's not available online. And we also have a bit of a difference in the level of investment for each of our conservation areas. So we had 40, we've only had 4 which have actually seen some kind of regeneration scheme or some kind of capital investment, and that includes Fraserburgh, Portsoy, Banff and Peterhead. And the issue that we've got is that, for example, Fraserburgh had just under £6 million spent on it, whereas the other regeneration schemes are only about £500,000. So there's only 4 out of 40 that have had investment. And then the ones that do, there's a real difference in what the communities have received. So there are a few of the issues for our team. And I thought I would go through like what a conservation area is, like what's the point of them, like why we have them. So I want to talk a bit about the conservation area status means and the challenges in applying some of the conservation area policy depending on the nature of the settlement and the community that live there. So a conservation area should have a very unique architectural character. You should be able to see that they're different from another place. They should have a very distinctive pattern of development or an architectural style that's clearly different or unique from modern development or from other settlements. So some of our conservation areas really achieve this, and that's the likes of Pennon, Crivey, Fordyce, Kincardine O'Neill, Benham, Udney Green. They all have quite a cohesive and distinguishable pattern of development, and the buildings within them are attractive and distinctive. So I suppose a good example of that is Monymusk. This is a very early estate village in Mar. It's associated with the farming and improvement era. It has a very clear architectural style based on the picturesque movement. So when you go into Monymusk, you feel like it's a conservation area, and it's very easy to articulate why it's significant or why it's unique. And we also have larger settlements, so places like Peterhead, Fraserburgh, that would have areas of it which are quite significant, quite architecturally interesting. But then some of the outlying streets, it's not so clear. So for example, Huntley, the square is really exceptional, but then once you get into the outlying streets, it might not be so clear why those areas would be a conservation area. So I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that it's harder to manage a conservation area when there's parts of them that suffered from either a poor quality change, or they just don't have that standout unique character that you can really use as defence when you're trying to apply policy, or if you're trying to make a design decision for new development in that particular settlement. And I suppose lastly, how easy it is to manage a conservation area is also in part driven by the people who live there and the decisions they make as to why they wanted to live there in the first place. So for example, places like Fordyce or Pennon or Braemar, people aren't necessarily choosing that settlement because it's close to work, it has a lot of facilities, etc. They probably in part chose to live there because of how it looks. Whereas for town centres, like your Fraserburgh, your Huntley, your Peterhead, people will have chosen to live there in part for practical reasons, that it's near transport, near a school, near work, near a supermarket. And so the fact that it's a traditional environment, or the fact that it looks the way that it is, might not have been a key driver for people to choosing to live there. And so conservation areas tend to be a bit easier to manage if people have actively chosen to live there because of how it looks, because of its character. That is slightly broad brush, but I just wanted to give you an idea about some of the idiosyncrasies we deal with once we go out to public consultation and start asking people about these designations. So I also thought it might be helpful to look at why we have these designations in the first place and what it is that we're trying to achieve, because I think that sometimes gets forgotten. So there are lots of social, economic and environmental reasons why we have conservation areas, but I don't have time to go through all of them. So I thought I would go through some of the more brutal economic reasons why we do it. Residents tend to benefit from higher property values. So the London School of Economics did a study and found that properties sell for about 9% higher in conservation areas in comparison to those without. And in part, that's because people feel protected from inappropriate development. They feel that the reasons why they moved there in the first place are going to be maintained. And then from a Scottish economy perspective, about 60% of international visitors ranked history and culture as a second reason to visit Aberdeenshire. And out of the top 5 things they do when they're here is that they visit historic buildings and places, and that includes our conservation areas. So in total, the historic environment brings about £6 billion into the Scottish economy through direct and indirect spend on the historic environment. And to give a comparison, house building contributes about 3.4 billion. So the historic environment is a huge economic driver for why we protect them. So what do our team want to achieve? And we've talked a little bit about the issues. And so now I want to talk about some of the things that we want to do to try and address that. So the main things we want are conservation areas that are fit for purpose. So we want to make sure that they genuinely fit that criteria of being of architectural interest, because if they don't, it becomes very difficult for us to apply policy. And if you can't articulate why a building or place is significant, then how do you justify the policy that you're putting forward? And so part of this is looking at reviewing our conservation areas, tightening up our boundaries, and de-designating when we think that's appropriate. And we also want to have documentation that supports better decision making. So documents that are genuinely helpful for planners, agents, homeowners, contractors, so that they understand what being in a conservation area means. And we need to have that in an accessible location that's easily digestible and gives people the information that they need quickly. And fundamentally, we want well-managed conservation areas that deliver the social, economic and environmental benefits they're supposed to. So where we have reviewed a settlement and it is fit for purpose, and we have the guidance in place so we can apply the policy consistently. We want to ensure that settlement maintains the standards that we can actually achieve the outcomes that designation is intended to produce. So we had 40 conservation areas in Aberdeenshire. We now have 37. So we have de-designated in the last 3 years. Cairnbolgan, Inverallochie, Aberthairder and Scotstoun was just de-designated on the 4th of November. And we're actually one of the only local authorities that are actively looking at de-designation. I don't think there's any other authority in Scotland that has actually looked at de-designating the ones that are maybe no longer fit for purpose. So we're kind of ahead of the curve in that respect. So what I wanted to do is just have a quick skip through each administrative area and just give you an idea about what conservation areas we have, what de-designations we're looking at and what we're reviewing currently. So in Buchan, we have 7 active conservation areas. We've got 2 that we're looking to de-designate, which unfortunately I can't let you know which ones they are. But also Cairness is a proposed conservation area, which is one that we're highly unlikely to take forward. I think it was originally designated to try and prevent development in that location, which isn't really what conservation area status is about. So it's unlikely we'll take that one forward. The one currently we're looking at is Peterhead, and we would keep that conservation area, but we just want to get better documentation in place for that one and possibly look at the boundary. In Banff and Buchan, we have 10 active conservation areas. We've got 2 which are up for de-designation. I can let you know about Scotstoun because that's just been de-designated, but we do have 1 more we're looking at. Again, the proposed conservation area there we would be unlikely to take forward. And we are currently looking at Pennon within Banff and Buchan at the moment to look to get documentation in place for that one. So hopefully we'll get that through committee towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. In Formartine, it's quite a small patch. We've only got 3 conservation areas. We're not proposing to remove any of them. But with New Green, we've just reviewed and slightly reduced the boundary there. I think it's likely we'll look at Old Meldrum next, again with a potential tightening up of the boundary in that location. We've got Turf as a proposed conservation area. It probably still does merit it, but there's not a huge development pressure in Turf at the minute. So I think that's unlikely to come forward within the next kind of 3 to 5 years. Then Mar is quite a big patch, so we've got 7 conservation areas in Mar. We've got 3 that sit within the Cairngorm National Park, which is Inverary, Braemar and Ballater. We are currently looking at Huntly, and we're looking at quite a significant boundary reduction there, which will hopefully go to committee within the new year. And then we have got 2 proposed conservation areas of Bankery and Clatt, which again we would be unlikely to take forward. I think the next one that we would likely look at would be a Boyne, which again would be looking at a boundary reduction. We would also look at a boundary reduction in Kincardine O'Neill, but I think that'll take a few more years to come forward. Then Geary, and we've only got 2 actual conservation areas in Geary, and there's 1 of them that we're looking to de-designate. We do have 4 proposed conservation areas. Dnecht is probably the only one that we're actively looking at. It definitely merits conservation area status, but actually there's not a huge development pressure in Dnecht. Most of the properties are listed and most of the properties are owned by the estate. So again, there's not a huge pressure to push that forward. Inverary, potentially we might look at areas of Inverary that would be a conservation area. But again, that is going to be a few years down the line. And then Kincardine and Mearns, this is another quite big patch. So we've got 10 active conservation areas here. We've got 1 that we would look to de-designate. We've got Downies, which is proposed, which we're unlikely to take forward. So the big piece of work in Kincardine and Mearns at the minute is Stonehaven. So Stonehaven is a huge conservation area. I think we'll look to split that into 2 with agreement from the community. And then we would also look at boundary reductions there, like particularly around the new town. So you'll probably see that come out to consultation within the end of the year, beginning of the year. So that's just a quick rattle through some of the problems that we're having, some of the things that we're trying to do to address it. And it was just really to open it up to see if anyone had any queries or questions at the end. I'd be happy to take them. So yeah, Mary, I'll just pass back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Cheryl. And I hope you found that sort of snapshot of the work that the team are doing on conservation areas both interesting and useful. As you can see, it's a huge piece of work. As Cheryl says, some of these things will take 2 to 5 years and possibly more. So it's for a very small team with all the other work they're doing, it is a huge piece of work that requires a lot of resource. So if there's no questions from the floor, please, if you want to put anything in the chat, please do so. And again, we'll give you all the details of how to contact us if you have questions at the end of the forum. Okay.
One thing actually, Mary, just to jump in, if anybody else does want to put in the chat, is we're obviously looking at the format of the guidance that we put out there about what you can and can't do in a conservation area. So even if you just have any highlights about what you think is the most important information, what you need to know, that would be very helpful for our team when we're drafting the documents.
Okay, thanks very much, Cheryl. Okay, right. As I say, if you want to pop anything in the chat, please do so. So we'll go straight on to the talk from our environmental health or environmental protection service, and this is on private water supplies. And we have 2 members of the team. We have Mark Nichol, who is the South team manager for environmental protection, and amongst other functions, Mark oversees the private water supply function, along with his scientific officer, who's Adam Ritchie, which some of you may be familiar with. Also is Jeanette. We've got Jeanette Taylor, and Jeanette is an authorised officer working with the Environmental Health Generalist team, and she covers the south area of Aberdeenshire. And Jeanette undertakes duties associated with various functions, but due to her previous role as a technical officer in the water team, all things related to private water supplies are Jeanette's forte, and she's become an authority on the matter within the team and has been fundamental in preparing the submission guidance note in question. So no pressure, Jeanette, from that introduction, but I believe I'm handing over to you to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'll just share my slides just now. Right, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes, Jeanette, thank you.
Thanks. Right, well, today I'd like to talk about planning and private water supplies submission guidance note that we've developed. Most developments use the mains water supply supplied by Scottish Water. However, some instances a private water supply is used. A private water supply can come from a well, a spring, a borehole, or surface waters. And in this picture here, you can actually see the pipe going into the stream, which is actually taking the water out of the stream. So I'd like to talk about why we introduced the guidance, how we assess water supplies, what the guidance says, and how it all fits together. But just for information, this is some of the water treatment you'd actually find on a private water supply, and some of the filters used. So why did we introduce the guidance? Well, water is a material planning matter for any development. It's actually using a water supply. The applicant must demonstrate it's actually a suitable water supply for the development. And we wanted a standardised approach to help reduce any undue delay. But we also wanted to help ensure the long-term sustainability of the water supply so that the residents and users of the development had a suitable service for that site. Because if we got it wrong, there's some public health implications. So that brings us to the first thing. What do we assess in a water supply? First thing we look at is the wholesomeness. Can the water supply be treated to meet the drinking water standards? What you'll see here is a list of some of the bacteria, viruses, and parasites that will actually survive in a water supply in Scotland. And if you actually drink contaminated water, you can become seriously ill. And this shows a health significance here. What we actually find as well is these bacteria, viruses, and parasites can actually survive for quite a long time in your water supply. Moderate means they'll survive for up for a week, but long means they'll stay in your water supply and survive there for up to a month. So what do we ask for? Well, we ask for a water sample to check the quality of the water for microbiology and also for chemicals, because some chemicals can impact on your health. But a water supply is only a spot check. It doesn't actually highlight the risks to your water supply. A water sample won't tell you, for example, what this infrastructure is like for the well, whilst what we're looking for now is a risk assessment. Because water supplies are highly variable due to the fact that the weather conditions change, that the use of the land around the catchment area changes, and also the infrastructure of the water supply changes, that we need to get something that actually looks at the longer term risks. And this is what we're asking for, is a risk assessment, which looks at the risks right from the water source right through to when you use it in your kitchen tap. It's a recognised approach by the Drinking Water Quality Regulator for Scotland as well. The second thing we're looking at is actually, do you have enough water? This is especially important when there's a shared water supply, when the water supply goes to your neighbours as well. And what we found is the last 10 years, the change in the amount of water and rainfall that's actually happening in the north east. You might not believe it, but there is actually sometimes a scarcity of water. And this was first noticed in 2018 when we first noticed water supplies drying up. There was a small event in 2020 and 2022, but again, it's hit this year in 2025. And when a water supply dries up, it lasts for months. There's no quick fixes because it takes quite a long time for that reservoir of water to disappear, but it also takes a long time for it to build up back again. And this means that you don't have any water for showers. You can't wash your clothes because there's no water for washing machines, for flushing toilets, for drinking, for cooking. The last two, drinking water and cooking, is quite easily solved. You can use bottled water, and hundreds of homes in 2025 in Aberdeenshire were given bottled water. Since 2018, there's been quite a lot of studies on the impact of water scarcity in Scotland. Was it just going to be a one-off, or is this the future trend? One study said that between May and August in eastern Scotland, we will remain in a climate water balance deficit, which means we won't have enough water in those months for our needs. Dundee University last year put out a warning saying that Scotland is vulnerable to water scarcity. And this is actually what we're actually finding this year. SEPA, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, measures the amount of rainfall throughout Scotland. And what this graph here shows is the actual amount of rainfall per month compared to the normal average yearly trend that you'd expect for that month. And this, I just pulled this report yesterday, and so this shows the last year. So you can see from November, we're only having half of the amount of water you'd normally expect. In fact, December was the only month in the whole of last year was above average. Everything else you can see is well below. And this is taken from the left, which is in the ski centre up in Strathdod, and it's in the hills where you'd expect to see a lot of water. So this shows that the rainfall water patterns are changing. So what does our guidance say? Well, this is a flow chart taken from our guidance. Basically, the plan application is submitted. What we'll ask is a risk assessment, which looks at the risks right throughout the water supply. It also documents who's on the water supply, what the water is used for, and we'll look at risks such as septic tanks, where your septic tanks are located, where your soakaways and infiltration fields are located. We're looking for these to be at least 50 metres away. So we'd like you to mark these on your plans with the distances. Well, as part of the risk assessment, we'll also look at having water samples. Now, these could either be a regulated water sample or a type B water sample, because there's two different types of designated water supplies. A regulated water supply is one which supplies a commercial business or where the public uses the water supply, or if there's more than 50 people using it, or 10 metres cubed used per day. Anything else is designated as a type B water supply. So we'll be asking for the relevant water test to be carried out. The other thing we'll be asking for is a yield test. This isn't basically how much water you can pump out of your water supply. What we're looking for is the availability of that water. When you're actually using water, how much water is available to come back into your water supply. And that's what we're looking for. And we're asking for you to get a competent contractor to demonstrate the availability of the water to make sure it's sufficient. So once we've got the risk assessment, which details who's all using the water, how much water is being used, we'll compare this to the yield test that you get. We'll also look at the risk assessment and look at all the requirements needed for long-term suitability of your water supply to make sure the water is wholesome. And what we'll do is we'll actually condition that and also look at having a water safety and management plan. One thing that we're not accepting as an actual entire whole water source is rainwater harvesting, because as I've just showed, the rainfall levels are changing and we're not seeing this as actually a sustainable and sufficient water supply. So we also have our guidance, by the way, on the Aberdeenshire Council website, and you can actually get a link to it there. So how does it all work together? So we'll request the water risk assessment, which takes water samples. In this, you'll get all the risk assessments and the treatments that you need for your water supply. And along with the risk assessment report, you'll also be issued a water safety template. This template actually will give you lots of information, and it will actually give you some ideas of what we're looking for, because some of it is pre-filled, just to give you an idea. And what we're looking for is the risks that we have identified and the risk assessment, and for you to put in mitigations to make sure that those risks are reduced. And this covers everything from getting to know what your treatment for the water supply is, how it needs to be maintained, what to do when things go wrong. It also asks for backup plans for emergencies, such as your water supply drying up, or if you have flooding, or if you've got a power cut, which means that most of your water treatment or your pump won't work. And by doing this all together, we're trying to reduce risks to the whole system and have a greater understanding of the water supply and have people prepared for those emergencies to have a long-term sustainable water supply. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Anyone, any burning questions on private water supply? Thank you, Jeanette. That was a very comprehensive run through the guidance there.
Thank you.
I think there's some messages saying that was really informative, so that's good. Also in the chat is the link to the planning guidance for water supplies, so that's in the chat for you there. Again, if you have any questions, maybe at the end of the forum, perhaps you're not just thinking of or try to formulate your questions, you're very welcome to come in at the end of the forum if you have any questions there. Or again, if you want to, once you've had a time to think about it, pop some questions in, and I say we'll give you an email address to do that. If there's Mark, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Yeah, thank you very much, Jeanette. Excellent presentation. I would just maybe add as well that our contact details are on the guidance note that we can distribute after this session, if that would help. And yeah, any queries, certainly don't hesitate to get in contact with us, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Okay, if there really isn't anything at the moment, again, thank Jeanette and Mark very much for that, and we'll move on to our next presentation, and this is a presentation on community wealth building. And this is by, who's going to give you this is Flick Miller, who's a team leader for our place economy that sits within our economic development team. And Flick is going to update you on Aberdeenshire Council's community wealth building strategy. Just as a quick overview, what is community wealth building? I'm sure most of you will be familiar with that. It's basically an approach that is focused on strengthening the local economy and basically trying to keep wealth circulating within local communities rather than wealth flowing out to external corporations. And the key principles that community wealth we have to work to in terms of community wealth building that's applied in Scotland wide. And that's effectively looking at encouraging local businesses and cooperatives and social enterprises to thrive within their local areas, to redirect investments into local projects and community priorities, to promote good jobs, fair wages and inclusive recruitment practices, again, all within the local areas. Looking at public bodies like the council to prioritise local suppliers and ethical procurement, and also using land and assets for community benefits such as affordable housing or shared spaces. So without further ado, I'll pass you on to Flick, who's going to give you the update on the community wealth building strategy, which has recently been approved back in June, I think, from Aberdeenshire Council. Full Council approved that. And Flick, if I can take you in, please.
Thanks, Mary. I will just share. Hoping that's coming up.
Yes, can see that.
Hey, good start. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so community wealth building. So this is a big old thing to try and condense into 5 pictograms. But just as Mary said, community wealth building is an approach just trying to retain wealth in the area and making, kind of essentially sweating it and making that work, those pounds kind of work harder and circulate and do more good within a local area. So it's based on 5 principles, and I'll just sort of whiz through them very quickly to give you a kind of a background. So we've got land and property, obviously, probably preaching to the choir here, being a source of wealth since sort of time immemorial. So socially just use of land and property, things like community ownership of local assets and local resources. So that's land and property, financial powers. So this is one of the sort of trickier ones probably for us to tackle. Access to finance, credit, and that kind of thing. If anybody's seen Bank of Dave on Netflix, that is essentially financial powers. But think things like credit unions and that sort of thing. Shared ownership of the economy. So that's sort of ownership of businesses, of economic anchors. So think cooperatives, employee-owned businesses, consortia, that sort of thing. Progressive procurement, and this is one we do quite a lot of work on. Essentially, this is shopping local on a big scale. So recognizing that public authorities and kind of large organizations, large businesses are big spenders in an area and big economic drivers. So essentially finding ways to award more contracts locally, keep the money here, keep it circulating. And fair employment sort of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Good jobs for good pay with good working conditions. It won't be news to anybody to know that that's sort of good for the economic health of a region. So Aberdeenshire Council has a relatively newly approved community wealth building strategy. So for measures that we will take within our organisation to make progress against these pillars. And as an appendix to that was the Charter for Energy Development. So this is an acknowledgement of the rapid change that's happening over the next couple of decades, really, in the northeast of Scotland. Physically, socially, economically, there's a lot going on. We're going to look back in a couple of decades and go, oh my God, do you remember 2025 when this was all just starting? So relating specifically to NPF4, and I should put here that policy 25 within NPF4 is also specifically about community wealth building. So that's also relevant. But the Energy Development Charter specifically was developed to relate to this particular little bit. Policy 11C, which is development proposals will only be supported where they maximise net economic impact. And that word for us, maximise, that's the critical thing. And it's trying to get people to understand that spending a lot of money does not in itself have any particular economic impact. You know, X millions of pounds of investment, you know, so what? The economic benefits do not maximise themselves. And to have an economic impact in a region, you need to take some sort of active steps. So for this strategy and for this charter, we did some sort of reasonably extensive consultation, community, third sector, industry representatives, and a survey in the development. And key to this approach is the spirit of collaboration. So we are here in a spirit of collaboration, not combat. You know, collectively, we can make a big impact across this region. And we can help to alleviate fuel poverty, improve housing, develop local businesses, upskill residents. This whole the whole document aligns with the North East of Scotland Regional Economic Strategy. So for the Charter, we use an assessment framework and we look at applications coming in and we assess them against each of these pillars, which are sort of loosely based on the 5 pillars of community wealth building, and given a score. So the framework and the Charter have very, very sort of specific and practical examples within it. So things like face-to-face interviews, guaranteed interviews, bespoke training, internships, apprenticeships, meet the buyer events, you know, very practical measures, practical steps that can be taken to make a really surprising impact in the local economy. And I just put here, there's an example of a condition that has been attached to an application. I should say that this was for a big application, and we do take a proportional approach to developments. So not all of them would necessarily look this scary. And that's probably all I've got at the moment, if there are any questions, but I'm always very happy to chat community wealth building and chat the Charter. Yeah, thank you, Barry. That's the Charter in the chat. But yeah, if there are any questions, very happy to take them, and also speak to anybody offline as well.
Okay, many thanks, Flick. That was a speedy review of where we are with the community wealth building and the Charter, and obviously very relevant to particularly the large scale developments that we have, and that's, as you said, that's under policy 11C of the National Planning Framework 4, but also for probably largely for the audience we have here, policy 25 is relevant in terms of community wealth benefits in terms of new developments. So, and the two links have been put there in the chat for everyone. So again, if there's no questions at the moment, again, thank you very much, Flick, for that presentation. We'll move on. Thank you. And the next thing up is the development management update. So what we're going to do here is basically take you through some updates of what development management teams are currently doing, or what they have been doing over the last year. A bit of update on where we are with staffing, although Paul did give you some information on that. A quick run through of performance. I will give you some information on how we're doing with our National Planning Improvement Framework. There'll be some information on new planning guidance that's just about to come out on biodiversity enhancements. And then following that, we'll go on to do a session on validation of planning applications, and then some updates on planning application fees and discretionary charges. So next slide, which should be our organogram. Okay, now this organogram plus details of the development management teams following an agents forum. I think a couple of years ago, you all asked that we should give you updated contacts, so that's now all on the website. But as Paul indicated, we have had some churn in the teams, so at regular intervals we have to update the organogram. And in fact, the contacts on the website have now just gone out of date, so we have to start updating those as well. So although you can't see the writing here, basically what you're looking at here is the organogram of the planning service, and that's obviously under the head of Paul, Paul being the head of planning. The purple to the left is the development management function, also the enforcement function, and our continuous improvement function. And that is under myself as the planning service manager. To the right there is in the green, and also the strange pink colour. That's the other side of the service, and that's under David McLennan's leadership as service manager, and that covers the policy team and also the place team. Right. So starting with the development management and staffing, as Paul has said, there's been a bit of churn this year. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a big intake of new planners. And as these things happen, just as natural progression, planners move on to other things, other jobs. We've had various people leaving this last past year through retirement. We've people on maternity. We've had people taking career breaks, people being seconded to other teams. And as I said, gone to other jobs in other authorities or indeed private practice. However, the good news is, and the positive news is, we are able to recruit, which we know is an issue with many other local authorities, obviously because of the current budget circumstances and the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in. We as managers do have to go through quite a process of scrutiny to enable us to recruit. So we have to go through various boards and management teams in order to get agreement that we can actually recruit. But as I say, the positive news is, because of the amount of work and the volume of work that's still coming into the planning service, both through mainstream applications and also the big energy applications and notifications that we have to deal with from the government, we are able to recruit. And in fact, just last week, Chris, for his Geary team, has went through quite an arduous couple of days of recruitment. Darren, for the Buchan team is, and for Martin team, is looking to recruit this Friday. And Wendy, our team manager for our energy team, is currently recruiting for that team. So it's very positive in terms of recruitment, and we are able to fill those gaps, which is good, and it keeps the work going through the systems. So as I said, this year we've had new seniors and we've had new planners. And then behind the scenes, I'll give a mention to our very busy admin and e-planning team, without which we couldn't do any of this, because that's the first port of call for applications and also the last port of call for the decisions going out the door. And again, they are able to recruit and fill gaps when people leave. I should mention that our energy team, that's a new name for the team. The previous name for the team was the Strategic Development Delivery Team, which was a bit of a mouthful. So we're all very pleased that it's now called the Energy Team. And to reflect the growing need to meet the energy demands and the applications and the consultations we're getting from the government, that team has been growing. And as I say, we're currently recruiting for that team. So things are very buoyant on the staffing side in terms of recruitment and the work that's coming in. So whilst other authorities may be finding a downturn in some of the applications, we are pretty steady, steady to busy, if you like, if you're looking at that. Okay, Kath, if you could go on to the next slide. So as I say, that organogram is available on the website, but it needs a wee bit of updating. I'll just do a very quick run through performance, as I know that's probably a very dry part of the presentation, but we always like to keep you informed of our performance. As Paul said, our performance is strong. It remains strong. This gives you an indication of where we sat in 24-25, and as you can see, there was overall general improvement in all the elements of planning applications and also pre-application inquiries, of which we keep, and we have to monitor performance on that as well. So that's 24-25 performance, and Kath, if we can go on to 25-26. Obviously, we're only halfway through the financial year there, and we're only just got the Q2 figures. And as you can see, that this is just a snapshot, but you can see there are some fluctuations there in terms of there's some performances are better than others from the last quarter, but again, there's all sorts of reasons why we don't hit targets. Hands up, sometimes it's because of delays from our side of things. Other times it's delays that are out with our control. For example, applications that might require legal agreements, and that might add time on, or particularly complex applications where there needs to be reconsultation, etc. But in general, we find our performance is, we're retaining a strong performance. And I think that's a reflection of you know, the strong staffing structure that we have and that we're able to retain. The two absolutely go together. And also, may I say, you know, the relationship that we hopefully have with yourselves as agents and developers, that we can retain that, and that helps performance, and it helps getting applications and decisions out the door, albeit not always the decisions that you're looking for, but albeit it does help with that decision-making process. Next slide. Yeah, so this is again just a wee snapshot of an overview of our workloads for 24-25, and it just gives you an idea of the numbers of planning applications that we receive, of the different categories of development, and you can see. Not surprisingly, the local non-householders, that's the applications we have most of, followed by our householders. Housing remaining quite strong in terms of 410 housing applications. As I say, we've just given a snapshot of where we are there, and the number at the top there, the 1,658, that's planning applications, decisions for all applications within that time period. So again, you know, a lot of planning decisions going through the process. But it's not all applications that we deal with. On top of that, there's pre-applications, and you can see just under 600 pre-applications were issued. So again, we thank you for engaging in that process, which we find useful, and hopefully you find useful as well. Over 600 permitted development inquiries, largely dealt with by our planning technicians, and that's on top of them dealing with validation of planning applications. We've had just under 60 legal agreements, and enforcement cases. Probably not often you hear anything about the enforcement team. We do have an enforcement team, and they're very busy. And obviously, they're looking at anything that's reported to them that might be a breach of planning. And so far, they've investigated 277 enforcement cases, and they've resolved 314 breaches. So kept very busy. They monitor development a lot, which is no mean feat within the size of the team and the size of Aberdeenshire. And just from the other side of the planning service, the policy and the police team, As Paul has mentioned, the policy team are very busy in looking at the next stages of the 2029 local development plan. So as most of you will know, going through the bids process, so far 400 bids have been submitted. That's through the call for sites. We've had 21 calls for ideas that have been submitted, and just very recently that closing date for the calls for ideas for communities has been extended to the 16th of March of next year to give them more opportunity to look at the bids and to look at the ideas that they want for their communities. So a wee extension of time there. Other work that's carried out by the place team, they've surveyed over or just under 180 settlements for facilities in the rural areas. They're continuing on the town centre health checks. And one thing that you may all be involved in at some point or be aware of is the open space audit. The snappy title of the Open Space Audit and Police Efficiency Assessment, which is part of the last tranche of legislation that has to be done by the Planning Authority. And that is soon to be presented to our Infrastructure Services Committee in the hope that that will be approved as a new planning advice. So again, once that's been done, you'll be informed of that and you'll get links to the planning advice. In addition to that, Cheryl's team has been very busy in the Doors Open Day and also giving advice to communities on forestry and woodland consultations and also utility consultations. So there's work all the time behind the scenes, possibly some work you're not aware that the teams actually do. Now, Paul also mentioned at the beginning there that we're now in the second year of our National Planning Improvement Framework, and that's basically a new, well, it was new performance framework that took over from the Planning Performance Framework, where we have to do a self-assessment of our actions and our actions for improvement, and ultimately we come up with an action plan, which we're currently looking at with the National Planning Improvement Framework Board. Now I'm going to pass you over to Kath. Kath is our Continuous Improvement Officer, who has been guiding us through the Planning Improvement Framework, and she's going to give an update on that and where we are with our action plan. Thanks, Kath.
Thanks, Mary. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the National Planning Improvement Framework, just to give you an update as to where we are. So obviously, Planning Scotland Act 2019, we have to provide an annual performance report to the Scottish Government and make it available to our stakeholders. And as Mary mentioned, the format for this changed last year. We decided to put ourselves forward as a pilot authority in the first tranche, and as a result of that, we have produced an assessment report and also an action plan. And you'll see all of these links. We've put them in the slides because they'll be available in the post-meeting information that we send out to you, so you can look at our plan, our action plan, and our assessment. And also we've put in the link to all local authorities. So if you're interested to look at our neighbouring authorities or authorities across Scotland, that's also the link to their performance. And the last link, which I thought was also useful to share with you, is the annual report that's collated nationally. So there is a national improvement team who work very closely with the Scottish Government. And I think the key benefit we've seen last year is that they've collated key challenges across all local authorities. They've put that into a national report. And the benefits of that is brokering these issues to the Scottish Government, having that collective voice, I think has been useful. So it's well worth a read if you've got time in your busy schedules. So to give you a little update as to what the framework looks like, I think you'll see here in this slide, it's very much forming a typical audit cycle, which I think we find beneficial. And I think we'll see improvements being driven more effectively this year, because under the old scheme, it was just very much a kind of glossy annual report, and we just do our annual report every year and return it to the Scottish Government. What we're finding now, it's a much deeper dive. So year one was that full assessment. We're reviewed by a peer review partner, which is Scottish Borders Council. We're also reviewed by the Improvement Service, so they analyse it. It's almost like a sort of audit session. And we also put that out to key stakeholders, where we had quite a detailed workshop and review going through it all. So I think challenging, but I think, you know, beneficial, and we've certainly taken a lot from year one. So we're now in year two, and this is when we update on our actions. So we're currently at the stage of updated all our actions. We've submitted it to our peer review local authority, Scottish Borders Council, who have given us feedback. And last week, we had a meeting with the Improvement Service where we had a workshop, a morning workshop, where they went through and sort of critically assessed where we were with the action. So I think it's much more meaningful. It's more of that continuous improvement cycle. So I think we're hopefully gaining a lot from this new methodology that's been adopted. So to give you a quick insight into some of the key actions, it's we don't want to bring them all up on screen. Please, you know, have a look at them and look at the link when you get it. But it's split into the sort of audit report that we do. It's split into 5 themes: people, culture, tools, engage, place. And just picking out some of the key actions that we're working on is discretionary charging. Now, Chris is going to speak about that later on today, so I won't steal any thunder from Chris, but that's an action that we've been working on last year and continuing to do that this year. Consultee liaison, this is something that nationally the Improvement Service has been working with across local authorities and key consultees, but also within our team. We've been looking at internal consultees and updating protocols, and also helping to look at that with some of our national consultees. Again, it's looking at timelines and resources and how can we both work together to ensure a streamlined and timely outcome on planning applications. Career development and retention has been another key area of work that we've embarked on last year. We've been very keen to be a sort of learning local authority, mentor new staff that we've been bringing in, either from a change of career or new graduates. Working closely with our 3 local universities, Dundee, Robert Gordon's and Aberdeen, we've been offering career development days, giving them an insight into planning. And I think that has been working effectively, and we've certainly been pleased to see a number of local graduates coming forward to apply for our positions, and we keep wanting to build on that relationship. With Robert Gordon's, we've also worked closely with the architectural students, and we've had a number of interesting projects. They've looked at Stonehaven flood prevention, and they've also looked at Peterhead town centre and looked at kind of innovative design, and we've given them a platform to present to the local community and the Peterhead board, and also open up some of our key engagement sessions in Peterhead. And I think it's nice to give students that kind of working platform. So keen to keep those relationships going and also encourage them into planning as a potential career in the future. In terms of work experience, again, we've worked with a number of local schools, and we're happy to give an work experience day. And I think when we do go into schools, or we have a student come to us for a work experience day, we're very keen on promoting planning as a career, but also encouraging them to engage in planning, because if you want to shape your local community or the place where you live, it's getting that message out that you need to engage in the planning process and the local development plan. In terms of one action that we've picked out just to let you know today in culture, is looking at planning delegations and scheme of governance. We're always looking to streamline the planning application process. We do have quite a complicated scheme of governance, and we're at the initial stages of looking to review that, but it's dovetailed into our corporate legal review of committee structures, etc. So it's very much a work in progress at the moment. Moving on to digital, we are very aware that digital is where we can make a real difference in terms of streamlining processes, and we have got a whole list of actions in terms of under digital, and at the moment we're looking to try to create capacity to bring some of these actions forward. Again, probably benefits of working of having all these issues collated nationally is the improvement services looking to help local authorities deliver on some of these through economies of scale as we work closer together. And it's also brought the issue up to the Scottish Government in terms of the front end portal that you'll all use when you apply for planning permission. There's been recognition that there does need to be work done on that to make it much more user friendly, and there's a lot more we could do right at the front end, and the Scottish Government has just started work on this, and I think it will be a relatively large engagement process, so do look out for that. But we're delighted that there's going to be work on that sort of front end, because that should make a real difference. In terms of pre-application monitoring, and also we've got in the last column monitoring of planning, of processing agreements and extensions of time. We've been trying to pull together Power BI dashboards just to make us much more agile in terms of moving work around and looking if we've got any kind of blockers in terms of what's coming through. So that's work in progress, but we've got a few made up, and we're keen to really progress on that to make us more responsive. Community engagement, our local place plan team have delivered an engagement toolkit, and that has been doing the rounds within communities as they develop their local place plans. And there's also been a request, it came out of our stakeholder review, that communities do find planning a complex process, and we very much acknowledge that. And it was a request to, could we help to signpost them to different guides and steps and information online. So that is being worked on. There's lots of information out there across a whole number of organisations, but can we help to signpost communities to the right information? And the last one there, just to highlight, is the employment land site prospectus that was completed and is available online for anyone to view. And if you want links for that, we can put that in the chat. And just to finish off with, obviously we value your feedback. Last year we moved to a national questionnaire, so it's very much a similar format. If you fill out the building standards survey, it moved to a national survey about 4 to 5 years ago, and planning have followed this format. And you should have all had an email, I think end of October, where we were asking if you would take 5 minutes to fill it out. We do appreciate your feedback. We had quite a low return last year, and I think we would just urge you to give us your views. We do go through them all. We do build it into our improvement plan. And I think the benefits of a national survey, just to give you the real sell, is that the improvement service does collate all the information nationally, and they do present that to Scottish Government. So I think nationally it's good to look at the challenges across local authorities and the feedback, and that again helps to shape the direction of travel. So please give us your views. We'll send this out again, the post information pack, and you'll probably get a chaser email for us just before Christmas as a reminder to fill it out. So that's all in terms of the National Planning Improvement Framework. I've got a small update from the Natural Environment team. So they presented last year on the development of a small-scale biodiversity enhancement scheme. So they just wanted to give you a small update that that has now been complete, and they hope that they've developed a easy-to-use assessment procedure and assessment form for small-scale energy. And they just wanted to for myself to pass on the thanks to everyone who provided feedback. They did look for volunteers last year who were keen to give their views on the assessment form. So thanks for working with the team. And collectively, small and large scale biodiversity enhancement is going to be circulated shortly to all of you as a planning advice on biodiversity enhancement. It's going to be circulated to councillors shortly, and once that procedure has been finished, it will be sent out to all of you, potentially within the post meeting pack. If not, we will put out a briefing note to all of you with all the information on biodiversity enhancement. Okay, that's moving on to Darren, I think. Barry, hand back to you.
It is. Thanks, Kath. And as Kath said, the National Planning Framework is a good read. So you'll get the links. We'll provide you with the links again, but it's also on our website. So it does enable you to keep a track on our performance, on our. You can see what's in our action plan, and some of you who are here today were involved in our stakeholder forums. That I was going to say last year, was probably the year before actually, because we're now on year 2. So again, we thank you for that. And once we find out more from the improvement surveys, there might be a repeat of that at some point. As I say, it's still a pilot, and we were involved in that pilot. So we're very well. I think we're very well versed in what we have to do and what we have to do in our action plan, as Kath pointed out there. So yes, now we'll go on to the validation of planning applications, and I see there's been a couple of things in the chat. Thank you for that. That's all relevant to what Darren is now going to present. So I'll hand you over to Darren, who's going to go through everything to do with validation. Over to you, Darren. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning, everybody. Apologies if this is maybe slightly a graveyard shift. Yeah, it's a brief update on the validation of planning applications. A bit of background for you. In the financial year to date, that's the first 2 complete quarters of 25-26, you, our agents, have submitted in the order of 95% of applications online via the portal, and that's greatly appreciated. That number has remained relatively consistent over the last 5 years or so, and we welcome this, which ultimately makes for a faster receipting of our applications. A small number of agents, when receiving an invalid letter, create a new application in the portal, which creates extra work for all involved, both our end and your own end as well, which effectively delays the processing of the planning applications. So we would encourage you not to do this and to keep the file created live. Crucially, if anyone has any training needs in this respect, please feel free to contact the service in the first instance. We can arrange for training for you. As Kath has said, the Scottish Government portal is being revised. Okay, so that's the public service announcement. So the slide on the screen at the moment sets the context, and you'll all be aware of the guidance, and you'll hopefully have a chance at your leisure to look at the links. Many of you will have been involved in discussions which related to the formation of our guidance in 2021. This adapts from the Heads of Planning Scotland validation guidance to reflect what we consider to be local circumstances. The Council approach is broadly in line with the HOPS guidance from 2017, but we believe as a lighter touch in some areas. And as always, we welcome feedback on this. Without your feedback, we can't improve and amend the processes. Slide 2, please, Kath. Thank you. Okay, I won't labour on this point, but slide 2 is an abridged extract from the Development Management Regulations, which you'll all be aware of, and it sets out what is required to make a planning application. This particular extract relates to planning applications only, not planning permission in principle or MSCs or other applications. But again, you'll get the context from the regulations. I'm conscious that at the foot of there it refers to a fee. So conscious that the fee requirement is often beyond your control and is one your clients may pay independently. Next slide, please, Kath. Thank you. On slide 3, got some statistics which relate to the validation of planning applications on receipt. These are over the period of the year 2024-25 and the first 2 quarters of this financial year 25-26. You'll see, and it possibly ties in with Duncan's point, you will see the figure of applications valid on receipt does not go over 20%. So effectively less than 1 in 5 applications that come to us are valid on receipt. In context, since 2022, that's April of 2022, there have only been 4 months where more than 20% of applications were received and valid on receipt. And when I say more than 20%, it's creeping above 20%. So the most common reasons for an application not being valid on receipt, discounting the fee requirement, are shown on the slides here. So we'll see that there's discrepancies between the site and location plan. There's discrepancies on drawings where potentially things like floor plans and elevations don't match up. And potentially there's issues around materials and finishes not being annotated on plans. All I hope you would imagine or hope you would appreciate are hopefully reasonably easy fixes, and they're hopefully something that hopefully it's not too big a job to get right in that regard. Next slide, please, Kath. Thank you. So that's the context. So slide 4 here I've got sets out the practical implications of applications not being valid on receipt. From the Council's perspective, an invalid application is process inefficient, as it requires multiple handling of the file and it delays the technical staff in dealing with your next application. From your own perspective, improving validation rates minimises delays in determining your client's applications, thus meaning a faster decision, an earlier referral to local members or an earlier referral to an area committee where required. Improved validation also minimises risks in terms of being caught should fees rise or where regulations may potentially change. And effectively, it's when an application is made, in terms of the definition, made, the regulations made is synonymous with being valid. The service is looking to devise a series of short videos to assist in the validation process. And you will, of course, be advised on these when these videos are ready to go live. So we will continue to engage with all of our agents on that, and these will be around the key topics that we've identified for the majority of our applications not being valid. So in summary, we believe that working together in the context, and this is crucial, in the context of the development management regulations will assist both parties and it will allow for more efficient processes and speedier decisions. Okay, if it's okay with yourself, Mary, I'm now going to close my mic and invite any questions.
Thanks, Darren. Yes, please. I feel there may be some questions in this one. There's already been a couple in the chat. Thank you. Maybe that's ones we can start with. Just the last one there from Duncan Robson. Yeah, you're saying the biggest problem you experience is the red line site boundary interpretation. Can you maybe expand on that, Duncan, if possible?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah, thanks.
All right. What we've found is we never ever get the red boundary right since there were changes to that. And it's like, good grief, how could I have done this for 40 years and now I can never get it right? I did speak with one of the planning technicians who I won't name, but she said, we are having a problem from our end too, because it's really quite complicated. And it's hard for us to get it right. Never mind ask, there's real inconsistency there. I know that a real big one is this relatively recent requirement of the roads department to include access from the nearest public road, which could be in rural properties miles away, and on a non-domestic application incur a massive extra fee to the application client because the access is so far away. But generally, getting an agreement on where the red line should be for sites, we just can't seem to get it right.
Darren, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll maybe briefly address that question if I can, Mary. The red line is clearly all parts of the application site which you're seeking planning permission for. So that would include all areas which contain operational development or land relating to the application site. That point's hopefully reasonably straightforward, and that concept hasn't changed in the 30 years I've been doing planning. So hopefully that issue is fairly straightforward. The issue relating to the road is not at the behest of the road service. It's the planning service who, following from HOP's guidance, have taken that position. Now, the alternative to that, which we could adopt, is that where there is a comment from the road service that can't be addressed by planning condition, you may potentially be looking at a refusal of planning permission. And the follow on from that would then be that a revised application itself would not have a free go associated with it. So from that perspective, that's why we're trying to capture all these issues at the outset. Fully appreciate the point that there can be very lengthy, extensive red lines. However, the guidance is there to allow a degree of flexibility, not inconsistency, but flexibility, where should you have an exceptional length of road, which would be the red line, and which may effectively increase the fee significantly, then the technicians should be in a position to allow a little bit of discretion there in consultation with the relative seniors or team managers. I think hopefully that addresses that point, Mary.
Well, I'll go back to Duncan on that one. Is that something?
I've found there's zero discretion on that road. I've had applications where initially I used to draw a kind of really close line and just another one close to the axis, but I've had where there's been zero discretion that no, we've to show the entire track all the way from the road access to the site, and it gets added to, it has added thousands to the application fee for relatively small projects, to the point that our clients have just withdrawn. So we're not getting a discretion on the application fee.
Perhaps, Duncan, if you can bring these matters to the attention of Mary, myself, Neil and Chris as team managers, we can look into that. And if either A, the guidance needs to be adapted or amended, or B, there's maybe some training issues or some guidance needed for the technical staff, then we can do that.
I did also notice too that it can, solicitors and selling or buying agents or so on will look at planning applications, and that access being included in development land is not always in single ownership, but then can create problems and conveyancing later on liabilities to the applicant in it. So I understand wishing to make sure that the access is part of the application, but this red line issue is a real problem.
Okay, no, I mean, as Darren has said, we're happy to look at that. And if you could maybe come to us, Duncan, with some examples of ones that you've had that you think, no, that this hasn't been, this has added to the fee, or this hasn't been, you felt acceptable, or there was no flexibility given, then that would be useful. So we can be in touch with you, or if you could come and be in touch with through myself, and we can look at that aspect.
Okay,
of the validation. No, thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for that.
And Andrew McPherson, yeah, you want to come in? Please do.
Yeah, it was just to echo the importance of this point, especially where we've got rural properties that we've had several that are, several kilometres down shared access roads. So we've found in our experience that rather than resolve potential issues, actually can often or not create them, because where you are applying for permission on shared land, we then get conditions, and where an adjacent landowner who's maybe not keen on the development in the first place who owns the road or the land that it's crossing, he then has a very powerful point to basically kibosh the application, because there's a condition on a bit of land he owns that is not owned by the applicant that he'll never allow to happen anyway. So it creates opportunity for people to kibosh applications out with the process, because they're given this long access road to sort of combat. And we've also found that there's zero discretion in working around this issue, and that it has to be the length it is, again, in our experience.
Okay. No, okay. Again, another point that'll be added to that. There's obviously issues there that we need to look, and this is the whole point of bringing this to your attention. You know, as the statistics maybe speak for themselves in terms of, you know, we're not getting a good percentage of first-time validation, but then we're trying to dig into the reasons for that, and this is a good starting point. So, no, thank you for your comments, and we'll certainly look into that. Just going again through the chat, Ross, you've given some comments on quality of applications. You feel there's discrepancies there. You want to come in?
Yeah, you hear me there?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Well, it's basically what I've written there. When you go through some of the weekly lists and you see other applications that's being registered and, you know, determined, the quality of some of these applications, when you certainly compare it to what ours is going through, is something that's chalk and cheese, you know, and some of it's quite embarrassing. And I don't think there's any agents registered for some of these, and I just feel some sort of approved body type register scenario where there's only a specific quality actually gets through the system, and it's probably going to change your figures as well on your hand. But how you do that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's how you do that. Obviously, we've got to facilitate everybody that wants to put a planning application in, and you know, the legislation doesn't state that it's mandatory that there has to be an agent. And you're right, in some instances that's where issues you know, arise, and there are people who maybe the only time in their lives they'll put an application in for their conservatory or for their extension, and you know, quite often that is difficult for the service to come and go and try to validate that application. So that is an issue for us as well. There has to be an element of judgment of what we can accept in terms of the validation rules and regulations. But again, we have to facilitate everybody who wants to make an application. So yeah, it is an issue. I recognise that. I appreciate what you're saying. Darren, do you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe briefly say two things, Mary. I suppose the first thing I would say, and you've hinted at it there, the validation guidance applies to everybody. It applies to the homeowner submitting their own application, and it applies to you know, every agent we've got that we work with. Second thing I would say as well, Ross, is that if there's any applications that you believe have been invalidated that do not meet the requirements that are set out either in the regulations or our validation guidance, then by all means, please bring them to, I'm offering you up here, Mary, please bring them to Mary's attention, and again, we can investigate that.
Yeah, we'll happily kind of provide a list of, I guess, examples of where I'm saying it's going to be inconsistent, and especially what we've perhaps been asked for at an upfront stage to get registered, and the amount of information between the two applications is quite damning, I would say. So yeah, I'll happily provide a list to you.
Yeah, hopefully when you say a list, Ross, you don't just literally mean a list. Hopefully it will be supplemented by, you know, examples of why you believe that it's inconsistent, etc., rather than just a list of application numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
No, that would be useful, thanks, because obviously we have to look at the whole picture. You know, we have, you're seeing inconsistencies. So if there's inconsistencies between how our teams operate, we're always looking at that. And I know there's been issues previously where perhaps one team do something slightly different. It's, you know, it's a big area, and we have lots of planners, lots of planning technicians. Largely our planning technicians work as a group. So largely it should be consistent in terms of validation, but if there's things slipping through, then yeah, we do need to know about that. So we'd appreciate that information, Ross. Thanks for that. Thank you. Duncan, so, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just
come back in again.
Yeah, I'd just like to really support what's been said there by Ross. I'm also part of the Architects Network group, a group of small practices that meet and go over issues. And we've come up numbers of times and actually held up examples of, look at this. This is a cartoon in crayon almost. And it's gotten lodged and approved. So there really is, I mean, Ross is right, and he could send you a list. If you look through even yourselves at applications that are submitted by homeowners with help from the technicians, the rules do not apply the same. We are held to a much higher standard, which I think is correct. But I really think that homeowners, if they're not able to put in applications of the same standard, including dimensions, heights to eaves, all the general scale bars and all those things, they shouldn't be getting lodged. They should be said, look, you're not able to do this, go online, go and look for an agent, but they definitely shouldn't be getting registered. That's just what I'm saying on that.
Yeah,
without having further information, Duncan, I might be inclined to agree with you, but as I say, I think the devil's in the details. So if we can get these examples, we can investigate them for you.
Yeah.
Or for everyone.
Thanks for that, Duncan. Neil, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, obviously, I'm interested in this conversation. I suppose I'm going to put a question back to everybody who's on the call as agents. I'm presuming you deal with other authorities as well. You've had experience of submitting applications in other authorities. I'd be interested to know, first of all, in terms of this sort of list of registered agents that you can use, I think we would have to check legally whether or not we can do that or not, and maybe that is an action we can take away from that. But are you aware of any other authorities that have that registered list and operate in that way? So I suppose it's an open question, really.
Darren?
Yeah, I suppose, Neil, kind of wasn't expecting you to ask a question. You weren't expecting me to answer your question.
No, I wasn't expecting you to answer it. I was actually asking the agents.
Yeah, but where I was coming from, Neil, where I was about to come from is as members of the RTPI, we're professionally barred from favouring one person over another. Yeah. We as members of the RTPI are professionally barred from recommending an individual. So I would share your concerns that on the face of things, I'm not entirely sure we could have an accredited agent list or whatever, but as you've said, we can take that away and have a look at it.
But I suppose I was just putting it back maybe to Ross or anyone else who works in other authorities and are aware of that. We can do benchmarking, of course, and we will do that perhaps as part of an action coming out of this. It's just out of interest, is there anyone aware of other authorities that have a similar approach as being suggested?
I guess it's not really a case of recommending actual practices. It would be a case of identifying the need to be qualified in a profession. You wouldn't accept a noise report from somebody that's not qualified there, or a tree survey or drainage report without having the appropriate qualification. So I don't see why that should differ from an agent submitting an architectural drawing.
Yeah, it's just whether it's legally competent for us to do that under the legislation. But yeah, that's obviously something we can take away, and we can maybe do some benchmarking with other authorities and see if they have something similar. No, thanks.
Okay, thanks, folks. Any other questions specifically on the validation? No, not at the moment. What we can tell you is that we're, maybe Darren, do you want to sort of let folk know about the training videos?
Yeah, I mentioned those briefly, Mary. As I say, we are looking to do a series of short videos, and they will be picking up on some of the key trends and the key themes that we've spotted through invalidation. maybe we might need to maybe delay those slightly once we can get some of these issues here resolved. You know, because if we're giving you a training video on some of the issues that we might later need to amend, then that's slightly counterintuitive. But yeah, we'd very much welcome you to input into what you think you would need this guidance on. I think that probably covers it, Mary, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, I mean, we have obviously been discussing this quite a lot in terms of the validation on the back of the statistics. And, you know, we have been toying with the idea of perhaps instead of an agents forum, or in addition to an agent forum, we could have some sort of workshop session, you know, on validation, if that would interest any of you. Or perhaps we're thinking once we get the training videos out, we get your feedback, we can monitor how, or make any changes, maybe as a result of today or any feedback, and then we can monitor how the validation is going on, and then perhaps offer some validation workshops. It's just something to put out there that you can maybe have some thought on. And Daniel, thank you. You're sort of saying that you've dealt with various authorities, obviously, and the approach to extending the red line to the public road is not something you've come across elsewhere. Okay, that's interesting, right? And again, as Neil had indicated, we do a lot of benchmarking with our partner authorities. So again, that would be something we'd be taking forward on that. It is, yeah. It is in the HOPS guidance, but yeah, again, in terms of reviewing that, and I think as Darren said at the beginning there, the HOPS guidance was given to everybody and there was interpretations put on that guidance. I think some authorities took it as verbatim and badged it as their own. We decided, you know, it's an Aberdeenshire validation, and we did some changes to that. Natasha, you've just reiterated that some do verbatim follow the HOPS guidance. So yeah, different approaches by different authorities. So it's certainly something we will look into. So no, thanks very much for your feedback on that. That's been really useful. And we will be revisiting this. I mean, we've got some work to do in this, obviously, and we'll be revisiting it and coming back to you for your feedback. So going forward, I'm going to ask Chris Ormiston, one of the other team managers for Geary and Banff and Buchan, as you'll be familiar with, no doubt. And Chris is just going to take an overview on where we are with fees, discretionary fees, and then he'll go on to discuss pre-application inquiries and an update on that process. Take you in, Chris.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll keep this quite brief. I'm conscious of the time, but it's just a brief overview as to where the service are with discretionary fees. As was set out in the slide, in terms of the context to this, the fee regs came into effect back in 2022. That afforded the planning authorities the powers to pay for them, to charge for them discretionary fees. As a service, we pull back from that to take time just to consider how it could work. But as Kath touched on, through the work that's been undergoing through the NPIF, we have now came to a time now where we have agreed to take this forward and to start to have a look at discretionary fees and what we could apply and where. At the moment, as is set out in the slide, the service are focusing on 4 specific areas, and just wanted to give a very brief update as to our thoughts, and just to say this is us just starting to scope out at this stage. But in terms of the categories that we are considering, it is, as set out on the list, NMBs, charge for non-material variations, looking at a surcharge for retrospective applications. This one is of particular interest to some of the members who are quite keen on that. reduce fees around not-for-profit or social enterprise. Again, we do receive inquiries around about this type of fee reduction from some groups. So again, that's something that we have been asked to investigate, and I think again that was feedback that was picked up through the MPIF that Kath touched on. And finally, pre-application inquiries. So we'll just go to the next slide, please, Kath. Thank you. So in terms of NMVs, we have started benchmarking. There are a couple of approaches that authorities apply throughout Scotland. In terms of the fee regs, it does set a standard charge of £238. From our own point of view, we are considering if we go down the route of applying a proportionate fee based on the categories of development, so household are up to the major. So that's something that we are investigating at this time, and the benchmarking will probably focus on that approach as opposed to the standard fee. Moving to retrospective applications, and again looking at a surcharge there, so that would apply for applications where the work has already been carried out, either in part or in full. In this particular one, we are considering applying the 25% surcharge to the standard planning fee that is in accordance with the regs. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Carl? Thank you. Looking at potential reduced fees for not-for-profit or social enterprise. As I touched on, there is interest from various community groups around about this type of application. It is quite specific in terms of how it is applied, and the two criteria are set out on the slide there. The first one is that it needs to be that the primary purpose is to contribute to not-for-profit or a social enterprise, and then where the application does then relate to a development which would contribute to improving the health of residents in the area. There's quite strict criteria that applies to these types of applications, and any application which we do receive where the applicant is trying to apply for the fee reduction would have to provide a supporting statement which would set out why they think that the criteria would apply for the fee reduction. Thanks. Moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you, Carl. And finally, in terms of pre-application inquiries, we first introduced pre-application. We first introduced the pre-application process back in October 2020. We did always sort of set out that we would run it as a trial to see how successful the pre-app inquiry process was. But I think we have always advised that we would at some point have to have a look at introducing fees at some point. So I think this is the point where we are at. We are fully, in terms of planning authorities, one of the few who currently don't charge fees for pre-application inquiries. So we are at that stage now through the work through MPIF that has been agreed that we need to take that forward. So as was said there, we have really just started to undertake benchmarking. We are having a look at how we apply a fee structure and how it could work based on the categories of development. So we are investigating options for all of the categories up from household up to the majors. As part of the benchmarking, we are reviewing all pre-application charges that are in place across Scotland, and there's quite a variation. And for those in the forum who have had experience dealing with pre-application across, then you will have had experience of the different fee charging structures that are in force. So it's quite interesting when you have a look at that. Really, I think from the service point of view, trying to balance out cost recovery with fair approach in terms of the service, and it needs to be proportionate to the scale of development. So all of these things are being considered by the service. In addition, and tied in to the fee charging, we will obviously be having a look at the processes and the service that other authorities do also provide as part of the fee charging structure that they have in place, and we could pick up on any good practice elements there. So we might have to alter some elements of the process that we currently provide to fit in with a charging structure. So again, just to flag up there that that's the type of work that we're currently investigating at this time. Can we move on to the final slide, please, Kat? Thank you. So just really to summarise where we are, very early stages, just really trying to gather our thoughts around about how we develop a fee structure, and that would also include exemptions, not just types of development where we would be seeking fees. In addition to the fee structure, part of that will be having a look at sort of around the process. Do we need to fine tune the process, update the process, and then associated updates to forms and to guidance and to the website, etc. Target implementation. There is a corporate process which we need to undertake. So in terms of the corporate side and the work that we've got to undertake, we probably would be looking about sometime in the next financial year, so 2026 to 27. But we will keep you informed as and when we have a better idea, and as we go through the benchmark and as we start to develop the structure, and also as part of the fee regs legislation, we obviously need to provide and publish our fee charter, which will need to be updated to accord with any fees that we introduce. So again, that will be updated and put onto the website as part of a package of information. So that's basically it. If anyone's got any questions, then I'm happy to try and assist where we can. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions specifically on either the discretionary fees or the pre-app process. Hopefully that's just giving you an overview of where we are. As you'll appreciate, we haven't, we're probably one of the authorities that are lagging behind in charging for planning services. So you'll be pleased to know, and you probably recognise that we don't, at the minute, we don't charge for various things that other authorities do. Unfortunately, things catch up, and you know there is certain pressures in terms of budgets, etc. that we have to look at that, and we've always been a little bit reluctant. You know, we want to have a good working relationship with you. You know, planning fees are going up. They'll be going up with inflation. That's the new side of the national planning fees. So we recognise there's lots of resource issues with submitting a planning application for yourselves, for your clients. But charging is something that we have to look at, and we are trying to introduce it quite gently, as hopefully you appreciate. Again, if you've got any other questions on that, let me know, and we will be keeping you updated on how that all goes forward. I'm I'm conscious of the time. We've got 5 minutes left. If there is any other questions or anything else, I will highlight one that I don't know, is it you, Ryan? Someone from Baxter Design has put in a comment on our recruitment, basically saying it's good that there is recruitment drive, but quite rightly you've indicated that we have lost some planners, and some good planners unfortunately have left us, and basically retention appears to be an issue with a high staff turnover. I would probably say that staff turnover hasn't been as high over the last few years as it was perhaps maybe pre-COVID. We had quite a higher level of staff turnover. We found it very difficult to attract staff up to the northeast. But since in the last perhaps 3-4 years, we have made inroads into our recruitment process, into our induction process. Perhaps, Kath, can I ask you maybe to put up slide 17? That was a National Planning Framework one that will show you that on our action plan is actually, there we go, just under people. We have an action on improvements to our career development and retention. So it's exactly what you're saying there. As Kath indicated when she was talking about this, we have a new career development career progression scheme for our staff, which effectively is more attractive to staff to be able to climb up that ladder, career development, and also increasing their income as they do that, trying to progress towards chartership of their RTPI. So we've been working very hard on trying to make that an attraction for staff coming in to the service, and also trying to retain them. We also try to give a lot of training, so that they can actually they can do the job and very quickly if they've just come in as a new graduate. We give opportunities to those who want to progress and get more qualifications. We try to give the planners a variety of work across the Shire, so they're not just stuck dealing with householder applications for the first 2 years of their career. We try to make it a bit more interesting, encourage them to be involved in all the improvement works that we're doing, all the working groups that we have, and also try to get them to focus on perhaps areas of interest and expertise that we can then develop them, and they can develop their career. The bottom line is we can't tie up planners to their chairs and tell them to stay. Planners will move on, particularly graduates will want to experience other types of planning, whether it's local authority, whether it's private practice, different areas. Some may just want to leave planning altogether. We've had some that are actually going on career breaks, to do other things before hopefully coming back to us. And we've had people who have retired. So there's some things that are actually out with our control, but we are trying very hard to attract staff, recruit staff, and retain staff. So hopefully the replacements that Darren, Chris and Wendy are working hard on will fill those gaps. And I appreciate you saying that we had these good staff that left, and appreciate that you're saying that they were transparent and helpful, and that's what we aim to try to train our staff to be. So thanks for those comments, and hopefully that's kind of explained what we're trying to do to retain staff. Okay, so just in the final minute, I'll tell you what we're doing next for you. First of all, can I thank you all very much for your time? We know how precious it is. It's 2 hours taken away from dealing with a client, getting a planning application in, and everything else that you do in your busy schedules. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. Hopefully you found it interesting, relevant. Certainly there's some of the comments that have come back to us, and particularly on the validation. We will take these away and work with those and come back to you. We'll always try to update you on anything. So what we will do after today is we'll make this presentation, all the presentations available to you. We'll make the recording of the meeting available to you. We'll obviously respond to any questions. We'll give contacts for any further questions that you might think about after today's event. We'll provide you with all the relevant links to the documents and the guidance. We'll put all that into a package for you. and we'll continue to provide updates when necessary and relevant. And obviously we'll take any feedback from you on the back of this forum, but actually any time. And also, as Paul started the forum with, doors are always open. We like to be a service that is available and open to you all. So all our contacts are on the website. So again, if you want to discuss anything, if you have any issues, if you've got any concerns, if you've got any compliments, always taken, you can contact the managers or myself, or indeed Paul, as he's already indicated. So it just remains to thank you again, and we'll keep in touch. We always like to keep in touch with you, to keep that relationship going, to keep that engagement going. And we'd like your feedback on what you think of these sessions, what we could do better, any other format that would be better for you. Has the technology worked? We'll be interested to getting your feedback on that. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll catch up with you very soon. Thank you.